Can we have a roll call, please?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Boykin, representing the State Treasurer.
Here.
Ms. Ortega, are you representing?
Director
Director of Finance. Yes. Okay. Thank you. And Mr. Tom Unterman.
Here.
And Terry McGuire for State Controller John Chung.
Here.
Mr. Rosenthal, you have a quorum.
Great, thank you. Welcome, everybody. So our first agenda item is the approval of the committee agenda and work plan. And I want to just make one note on this. In February, under governance, the work plan shows that we would do the committee charter review, and that has been moved up from June, where it was initially, so that this committee can take action on committee charter review in advance of the June meeting, when all of the committees will be bringing their charter review suggestions to the full board for consideration. So just to note that that is the change, and therefore at our next meeting in February, or not at next meeting, but at our February meeting, we will be dealing with that issue. So any questions?
Move approval of the agenda and work plan? Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Great. Thank you. The next item is the approval of the minutes from the June 2013 meeting. Any questions, comments on the corrections to the minutes?
Move approval. Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay. So Ortega's abstaining. That's approved. So the next item is the progress on the June 30th, 2012 External Financial Auditor's Report on Internal Controls. It is a consent item, but I would actually like to move it off of consent and ask a few questions, if that's all right with others.
Sure.
Mary Ann, I don't know if you would like to make any preliminary comments, or we can just see if there are the questions that the committee members have.
Well, I can just give an opening statement about it, that item 3 provides that update on the status of management's corrective actions related to the findings that came out of our financial external auditors report on internal controls from last year. And there were 4 findings, and the committee had asked management to report back on progress of those corrective actions. And this was originally presented back in February, I believe, and now it is being presented again for more status progress to the committee. So management is available if there are specific questions about any of the corrective actions.
I don't think we need any more staff presentation unless, are there questions from anybody on the committee?
No.
Okay, I would just like to ask, the progress is really what is in the appendix, because the front part seems to be pretty much the same language as 7 months ago, the last time we received a report. So I guess what I would like to understand is on page, ARM 18, where it says that at the top that management has committed internal resources to focus on the following targeted outcomes by fiscal year end 2012-13, and then there's a list of 5 or 6 bullet points. Since we're now 2 months beyond 12-13, I was wondering if we could get a report on kind of how we did make, what kind of progress has been made on those particular issues.
I can speak to
Thank you.
some of the activities that we've done so far this last year. We did develop a curriculum for staff on training to accountability and internal controls. We successfully trained and had 910 participants participate in that mandatory training to discuss and have a more familiarity with their internal control participation in the organization. Our CFO participated in every single one of those courses and discussed the internal control environment. We also have incorporated the internal control and accountability training into our onboarding of all new staff, so this will be an ongoing discussion and curriculum as we move forward in the organization. We've developed a framework for processing and tracking risks in the organization at the business level. We have, there's different areas in the business functions that already track internal controls and risk management, and we're trying to formalize a framework to integrate throughout the entire organization. We're patterning it off of what we've done at the enterprise level, so we're cascading that down so that we can have a linkage up into our more formalized reporting up to the board level. We've also conducted communication strategies around internal controls and risk management through a number of different key discussion areas and forums, leadership forums in the organization. So those are the things that we've done internally to have staff become more aware of the internal control environment and risk management activities that are going on. So we have successfully completed the training component that we had identified.
Okay. And one of the points that was made when these in the auditor's report was that a lot of the constraints on addressing these problems were going to be go away once we had the new accounting system. And now that we're live with that, can you comment on how that is working in terms of helping us address these issues and whether we're seeing progress in that regard?
So I certainly think that the implementation of Business Direct is going to carry us forward in the direction of identifying control opportunities, of identifying fallout from interfacing systems, enabling us to react to those differences in a way that allows us to mitigate the risk of inaccurate or untimely financial reporting. Given our state of implementation at this point, we're kind of 6 months, 7 months into it. We have certainly already begun that process, but I don't want to leave you with the impression that it's complete. This year's financial statement process was the result of combining data from our old system and our new system. And so we had the advantage in the latter 6 months of the fiscal year to take advantage of the interfacing system and the data in there. And we have, in fact, identified anomalies in data that are coming from various sources, so we can research that and determine if those differences are material in any way to our financial statement preparation process. We are certainly experiencing both the benefits and challenges of automated internal controls in that they provide a break point in a process, and we have to get the issues resolved before the process can continue. So in addition to identifying those anomalies in controls, we also are slowing the process down in some ways, and so we're responding to that in dealing with the backlogs that are created. So I do want to assure the committee that the controls are there and they are providing value added at this point. I'm not going to say that we've assimilated them into our production environment seamlessly yet, because I think it's too early to say that, but we certainly can see the benefits that will come out of that process.
The one other thing, if I could just request that when we have the updates in the future, the detail in the back is extremely useful. It might be helpful to those of us who might be a little bit lazy in comparing it to the previous reports, if you could highlight in red or italicize or something what's different from the last report. That would be appreciated. So thank you very much for all the work on this, because it's very important. Great. Then I think we're on to our next agenda item, which is the annual report of benefit underpayments and overpayments, which is also consent. So we just need then a motion, I think, to approve both items on the consent calendar. Dr. Yetman, yes.
Mr. Chairman, with your permission, I would like to discuss the issue off of consent.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this item is presented to the committee out of necessity. It's required. It's a regulatory requirement. As you can see at the bottom of ARM 27 are three bullet points, A, B, and C, and they say, hey, we have to give this to you and tell you where things are. But I wish there was a letter E, because letter E would say, and help frame these conclusions with respect to the system as a whole. So as you go through it, you see, geez, there's these underpayments and there's these overpayments. And what do they mean? Is this bad? Is this good? Or are things terrible? And it doesn't do it, and nor should it, but it's something I think I should do, is to point out and say, well, how does this compare to the system as a whole? So of all the benefit payments made in a year, where does this fall? How big are these numbers? They're really, really tiny. So I'm a teacher, as many board members are, as many members are. And as a teacher, if someone scores over 99%, that's pretty good. It's pretty rare. So, but that's kind of what you're looking at here. So there are people, so you read it and you say, geez, there's these underpayments and it's all this money, but realize that it's really, really tiny compared to the organization as a whole. So although it's required that this information be brought to you, I think it's important to provide that perspective. And if you've got someone at division, my guess is Ms. Plett's division, but I'm just guessing there, that's nailing it that close, then I think that's worth praise. So, but that doesn't come out as an auditor, because as the audit committee, we have the relentless pursuit of perfection, which is what you always should try to obtain. But once in a while, I think it's good to step back and say, geez, how are we doing? Where are we? And I think this is a really nice, promising report, and it has, I think, a lot of nice things to say that doesn't necessarily come out as auditors. And if I could highlight one thing in particular, on ARM 29, look at the graphs on ARM 29. Look at the directions. Overpayments, let's just look at overpayments. More findings of overpayments. Does that mean overpayments are going up? No, it means we're finding more, right? It's the system and implementation of hard work by people are finding more, but look at the dollar amounts. Where's that going? Do you see, it's sort of the low-hanging fruit, right? It's to the point now where more things are being found, but they're smaller and smaller as you're going along. That shows significant improvement in a process that's getting to the point where, geez, we're starting to find smaller and smaller things. That's just wonderful. So underneath this report, which audit reports can somehow have a negative connotation, can't they? Underneath this is a lot of people working really hard, and in my opinion, looks like doing a really nice job. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
And I appreciate your comments, Dr. Yetman. I would like to point out to the committee that CalSTRS pays an initial estimated benefit. So we really work hard to pay a benefit as soon after the member's requested benefit effective date as possible. We don't always have all of the information from the employer at that time, and we know that. And so we make an estimate based on the information that we have in the system. But subsequent to that, we're going to get an additional sick leave report from the employer. We're going to get other reporting information that may not be consistent with our estimate, and we make adjustments in that initial retirement period. That number of transactions is reflected in your over and under payments report. Are we paying benefits wrong? That's a question I would be asking if I were in your shoes. And the answer to that is, in this circumstance, no, we're not. We're actually paying benefits consistent with the information we have from the employer, and we're making adjustments to that benefit as the employer provides us with more complete information. We haven't yet been able to separate that volume out completely and associate that with this under and over report, although Financial Services is working on a way to do that, because that does skew the volume of over and under payments. Those tend to be very low dollar amounts, so the dollar amounts that you're seeing are associated with some of the more complicated cases that we are working and correcting. And we have a team as part of our compensation, or part of our data preparation project, that is looking at some of the problem areas that we know exist and making corrections to those cases. Those can have some significant dollar amounts. That activity we want to continue, because particularly before we transition into a new system, we want to have accurate data in the current system. But I do want to assure you, and despite Dr. Yetman's assurance that this is a very small population, there's also a big chunk of this small population that is normal course of business work, not errors made by the system, not problems that we need to solve. It is part of the routine operating process. Now, in a new system, can we get information from the employer faster? Are there ways for us to get more accurate information from the employer? We hope so. But given the current environment, it's unlikely that we'll see a lot of change in that now. But that is an objective for us. I just wanted the opportunity to make that case for you.
Thank you. Thank you.
That's very helpful to understand.
Tom,
So-
can you put your request in, and then I can turn your mic on?
Oh, I've forgotten how to do that. Sorry.
Okay, now, and I will
Okay, am I on?
move you up. Now you're on.
Okay, sorry. I'm new, and the technology is so impressive. So, just trying to get a sense, since nothing will ever be completely perfect, what percentage of overpayment and underpayments do these adjustments constitute?
Well, we haven't been able to capture that information in a perfect way yet.
Yeah.
But I would say that the majority of the adjustments that are reported here are a result of normal course of business adjustments as a result of the onset of a new benefit.
Uh-huh.
If I may, it's also important to point out that just because an overpayment was waived doesn't mean that it's not caught and corrected
Right.
That's correct also.
in short order,
Yes.
within a short period of time. So what we don't do for the report is sort of net and say, and give you the net. It's just we're giving you the gross amount.
Sure.
So an example of that would be when we receive notice of a member's death, then as soon as we receive the notice, we can stop the payment. But our system may have already issued a payment. Sometimes we can collect that back from the bank. Sometimes we have to wait for the deceased member's family to return that money to us. That's in this report, but those are not incorrect payments.
Right.
And we recover that. And so it isn't a net loss or gain to the system as a result. It is part of normal business processing.
Sure. No, I understand that. I was just trying to get a sense of the magnitude of what happens in the ordinary course of business that creates a variance. And
I'm trying to get that information as well. And
Yeah.
so part of our process now is to isolate that information a little more carefully.
Sure.
I will say that our current system makes it difficult to do that because it doesn't have any true reporting functionality, and we have to create a process to collect that information. But I think one of the comments made in this report is that when you're trying to do a comparison of CalSTRS to other systems and their rate of over/under payments, many of them don't report adjustments. And so it isn't a direct apples to apples or necessarily even fruit to fruit comparison, because we do include those adjustments. And if we can isolate that out, we might see a truer picture of the actual adjustments being made that have a financial consequence to the system.
Okay. Thank you.
Great, well, thank you. So then we can move on to the next item, which is the audit results for 12/13. Mary Ann?
I'm sorry, maybe I wasn't paying attention. Did you vote on
I don't,
the-
they're not action items, are
other
they?
consent items? Okay.
Yeah. I think I mistakenly thought they were, and
And I
they're
wasn't
not.
sure if the conversation removed it from consent to action, so
No, I think we
Thank
just
you.
moved it off of consent to.
discussion.
Thank you for clarifying my confusion. Okay, let's move to the next item then.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Item 5 provides audit services results for fiscal year 12/13. In accordance to the Audit Services Charter and in order for you as the ARM Committee to give oversight to the work of audit services, I present status reports periodically to give you visibility into the work of audit services. In accordance with your work, your committee work plan, I present the previous fiscal year's results in summary in our September meeting today. And then our mid-year status will be reported for this fiscal year in February. The 1213 audit services results include both our work in internal operational audits as well as our employer audits, and are presented in the material in 5 separate attachments. I'm happy to speak to any of the material, but I would like to take a few moments to point out some challenges we faced specifically in the employer audit arena. Fiscal year 12-13 was a major transition year for audit services with employer audits for 2 significant reasons. One being we had a great deal of staff changes taking place during the year, and we implemented and started to see the results of a new employer audit approach. With regard to the staffing changes, we started off in July with 12 positions. 9 of those were filled, 3 were vacant. During the year, we saw 4 additional vacancies due to employer auditors taking retirement or promotions and like. Through recruitment, we were able to add 6 additional auditors. So by the end of the fiscal year, we had 11 of those 12 positions filled, but only 5 of those filled positions were the same auditors who started the year with us. So the effort of recruitment and training and ongoing monitoring took a great deal of our time, both to educate and to train our new positions, as well as to introduce some new processes into employer auditing. I don't want to lose sight of the fact that the board offered and agreed to give additional staff for employer auditing effort. That staffing results in 7 additional positions coming to us as of July 1st, and we initiated that recruitment early in the process, and we're going through that right now. With regard to the results of completed employer audits, you see fewer completed audits, but you actually see an increase in the results of those audits, and I'd like to speak to that a little bit. It's reflective of us implementing a new process, and that is to expand our audit procedures when the auditor identifies a systemic problem. And the result would be that instead of reporting simply on those items we had sampled, if we believe we saw a pattern in an employer with noncompliance, we expanded our procedures to then identify and capture the magnitude of that problem. I will also say that during 12-13, we were able to provide additional training both to existing auditors and our new auditors to introduce statistical sampling, to give us another tool in our toolbox to look beyond judgmental sampling and actually be able to start to extrapolate results to an entire population. So with that, I'm happy to walk through the attachments or just pose questions at the committees.
Bob, do you have anything to offer before we turn to the committee? Go ahead. Oh, yeah. I don't see anybody in the queue here from the committee, so go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mary Ann, would you, I want to call your attention to ARM 58 and 59. There's, at the end, and there's summary graphs that demonstrate perhaps, I think, what you were alluding to.
ARM 58 and 59?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
So one of the things that I look for is, of course, changes over time and things, and I see a couple changes here that I think the board should, that's worthy of at least some discussion, which is clearly the spike that we see in FY 12-13 with respect to the $10 million. And then also a spike in appeals. I think there's probably more than one thing going on with the appeals, but there's probably a couple things. I think it's probably informative to discuss with the board. What factors, in your opinion, are led to an increase in the dollar amount of findings, and in particular led to a pretty significant spike in the number of appeals, and whether or not you expect the appeals rate to sort of die down over time, or if that's something that we might expect to see going forward. Thank you.
Well, I will clarify that in 12-13, with the initiation of looking at systemic problems, that when a problem was identified, again, we would try to identify the magnitude of that problem. For instance, if there was a particular issue with a pattern with a district making a determination to record what was not creditable to DB and/or whether it was credible to DBS instead of DB, the audit would capture the entire population, and that resulted in then reporting a larger number of potential member accounts that were then put into the report. Since the final report is a determination, those individuals as well as the employer who are impacted by the audit have the opportunity to appeal. And so simply the magnitude starts to increase, because if we report in a prior audit there were 2 items versus the next audit it was 20 potential member accounts, those then 20 member accounts had an ability to also appeal. I don't know if that helps.
It does help. So is it fair to characterize it as say that who has the authority to expand the audit at that level? Is it the auditor themselves, or do they seek the opinion of a supervisor and then expand it along that line?
The final determination is with me as the chief auditor.
Good answer.
We certainly have a deliberative process of multiple layers of review before a final determination is made.
Perfect. Thank you for that answer. And then, is there anything else going on with appeals? For example, the CalSTRS ability as where to seek the funds, only from the employer or the employee. In particular, I'm referring to, I don't know the code section, 23008C.
Again, that's the change in the teacher's retirement law that went into effect with the repeal of 23008C. In the past, those overpayments were the responsibility of the employer. And with the change in law, the individual member that had received an overpayment was then responsible for repayment.
And so in your opinion, would that then lead to more individual members appealing?
It certainly has been the case.
Brian, yes.
I can just provide a little bit more detail on the legal side, although we can't discuss specific cases. So when the augmentation was requested from the ARM Committee for additional audit staff, there was also a request for legal staff to deal with this increased level of appeals that was anticipated. And so part of the recruitment, Senior Counsel Scott Taylor is now the counsel handling audit appeals. And then we'll have a paralegal working with them to try to handle this increased volume.
And if I could add to that, in addition to the increase in audit staff, not only was there additional legal counsel, but the benefits and services and our financial services for the additional effort and workload that would be created was also added.
Well, I have a question then about that. So if we look on ARM 57, there's the column under C, overpaid, underpaid benefits identified, and all of those numbers are overpayments as opposed to underpayments.
There are some netting that is taking place
Right.
within the body.
I'm
This
sure
is
that
this
there's-
is
yeah,
this
right.
is the final
Right.
total
Right.
that is occurring.
But on balance,
On
there's more
balance.
overpayments going on than underpayments.
Correct.
Now, this is based on errors in reporting earnings. So getting back to what Peggy was saying on the prior item, a lot of the underpayments or overpayments that we would be making would be based on the fact that there was incorrect reporting to CalSTRS, right? So
Correct.
this is then identifying that out of, certainly more than half of the audits that were done, there was identification of, on balance, overpayments relative to underpayments. And I guess my question is, what do we do with those results? I mean, do we come to some conclusion as to why that is happening? Do we see patterns there? Do we respond with new rules, with new educational efforts? In other words, do we do more with this information than just try to recover the overpayments?
And that's a great question. Right along with issuing these reports, excuse me, is both the raising awareness to our business partners here in the organization, excuse me, let me get a drink. And raising awareness to the fact if we identify a cause, which we will do, why is this happening, is relaying that back over to benefits and services to say, there is a need for increased training, increased education. We want to identify that cause so we can bring it back to the system to then address and avoid that from happening in the future.
Go ahead, Peggy.
And much of the, many of the findings revolve around what is considered credible compensation and what is not. And understandably, there's incentive on the part of the membership to receive the largest benefit that they're possibly going to be able to receive. And so there are inconsistent interpretations of what is credible to the defined benefit program and what is credible to the defined benefit supplement program. Staff is in the process of developing regulations to help clarify for consistency purposes. So we are addressing this issue of credible compensation. We're introducing that topic tomorrow, and then you'll see draft regulations later on this fiscal year for consideration and for us to push through the process. We also are able to go back to employers and provide them with additional information in terms of a directive or a circular. That's how we normally communicate to them, to stress the importance of accurate reporting on A, B, or C as an issue. There are some themes that we've identified in audits in the past that we've used to change our business processes so that those changes, those problem areas no longer emerge. We're catching the tail end of some of them in the audit process because they do a look back of 3 to 4 years, but in an ongoing future, will not experience those same problems. Member, non-member used to be a very common finding, and there could be a large dollar amount associated with that. We're catching the tail end of some of that now, but in the future, our process has changed so that employers can't make a mistake about whether someone's a member or not. Our system doesn't allow that kind of a distinction. So, we are actively looking at how can we provide better information to the employers, create additional requirements for employers so they report to us accurately. We want to get accurate and timely information from the employers. That's our objective. We don't like it when we have to go back to the employers and impose a penalty. We don't like it when we have to make a finding that they paid someone incorrectly, they reported to us incorrectly, and as a result, we paid them incorrectly. And now we have to recover from the member, and if it was due to an employer's fault and we can't collect all that money back from the member, we collect it back from the employer. So there's incentive for employers now to comply in a way that they may not have taken advantage of or awareness of in the past.
Bob?
I think a useful way to think about this is when these audits are done, there's value to the audit. It uncovers something wrong, we can fix that. But many years ago, with Mary Ann, these discussions occurred. And so today, I think it's useful to think of it as there's 3 feedback loops and frame it that way. The first feedback loop is, so you do an audit, you find something, what can we learn from that to communicate internally to CalSTRS? Not only Ms. Plett's division, but other divisions. Hey, we're finding these things seem to be coming up a lot. And as you heard her say, that's incorporated into the process and procedures internally. Another feedback loop is to let the employers know, hey, we're sort of finding these things, these are common errors. Let us inform you of what the most common errors are, how to fix it, and she addressed that as well. The third feedback loop is entirely within audit services, where when an audit plan is drafted for the following years, audit results from prior years are an important component of deciding who to look at. So these audits aren't randomly chosen. The employers are chosen based on a carefully conducted risk assessment. So you would expect to find the higher risk ones are audited more frequently, and you find findings more frequently. So it's an intentional part of the process. But you can think of these 3 feedback loops, and what that does is it adds a lot of value to an audit, far beyond just finding something wrong here, finding something wrong there. So these exist, and they are ongoing, and that was just an excellent question to ask. The broader question is, is the value of this limited to this, or are we leveraging it? And the answer is, my opinion is that they're leveraging it.
Great, well, thank you. I think I don't see any other questions from the board, so let's find where we are in our agenda here. The audit director's update, Mary Ann?
I think I'm going to say that was sort of a combination, where we're at, and that is my auditor's director's update, and I have nothing further to add.
Okay, any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do apologize.
Never apologize.
Mary Ann, can you just maybe in 30 seconds tell us where, give us a progress on the audit of the annual financial statements?
The audit of the financial statement is ongoing. They are on site as we speak. They are on target with their initial work plan. And at this point, staff is cooperating fully with the auditors. I'm not sure if I can speak much more in detail to it.
Well, thank you for that report.